Wicked. Here we are with Divya Darling. How you doing?
I am brilliant. Thank you. And yourself?
Superb. I'm having a really good time. I've just moved back to Melbourne, and I've been here for about 3 months, just over 3 months now. Been back in Melbourne for that time, and yeah, spent a lot of my time in service. I had a realization the other day. I'm like, I don't think a day has gone by where I haven't given some value or provided some service, and I feel really good. And I wonder why. I sort of.
I don't. Is it possible not to in any way? Like,
Trust me, I've had periods where I've not left the house and not wanted to deal with the world, and yeah, so it's definitely possible to not.
Yeah. Yes. When we are in fear and not living in an inspired life, absolutely. I fully concur. It is possible to not, and I too have had those seasons in my own experience.
So tell us who you are for those of us who have no idea who Divya Darling is.
Okay. I was thinking you'd do a little bio intro bit. So as Divya Darling is my name, which is a chosen name. So I don't know if you know the story behind my name.
No, I don't. Please share.
I'll give the brief bio first. Divya Darling, founder and director of the Intrinsic Brilliance Institute, where I work as a brain trainer, helping people create alignment in their lives so they can create the outcomes that they most desire. And part of my mission and vision and purpose, you were sharing yours with me earlier, mine is to help the world enlighten up and reinvent reality for themselves if their experience is not one that they are living at the moment, to access the tools and the resources to be able to do that. And so coming back to your question about how I chose the name Darling, when I was writing the chapter in my book on the art of what I call selfing, how do we wake up in the morning and remember to be who we are, and like, how do I know how to be me? I realized that my name that I was born with, Divya Hemnani, wasn't quite right. It wasn't, though it was, it's not that I disliked it just didn't feel right. And so I made a choice to change it to the name that I call myself in my head, in my mind, which is Divya, Darling, because that's the way that I speak to myself when I speak to myself in my mind. And so I changed it. So
beautiful.
Yeah.
What does that represent to you, the Divya Darling?
Well, it's another kind of anchor or cue. I have these 2 tattoos on my wrist. One is a neuron,
Can we see
and
them?
the other is a key. You can see them. They make a rainbow, a neuron and a key. And the neuron represents to me the neuroplasticity, right? My degrees are in neuroscience, psychology, cognitive sciences. I'm a bit of a neuro nerd and really love understanding the brilliance of the hardware that we're equipped with and the software that we install and can change, and the way it all works together. And so the name itself is another cue, much like both of the tattoos. The key represents to me gratitude, the key that opens every door. Divya Darling represents to me that reality is malleable and yours to create and to define as you see fit, and to there's a I often call other people darling, just as a, you know, when I meet people, I often call them love or darling, and so in that way it also reminds me we're all one family. So when I'm like, this is that darling, and
familiarity. Everyone is familiar.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's
and other people in my network seem to love saying, "Oh, Miss Darling, Divya Darling," when I call. So that's been fun.
Hello, can I speak to Miss Darling?
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And so your name is chosen.
Also chosen, correct. And I love the fact that it's double D as well, because I got the double Z or double Z depending where you're from. And one of my best friends in the world, he's Darcy Davis, so he's got the double D. So I'm kind of biased with the doubles. And you look around, you got Herbie Hancock, or you got lots of people who got the double letters. So it's interesting they got the double Z as well. But Zulu, Zulu comes from Shaka Zulu. Shaka is the name that I was born with. It's and it's really convoluted, the whole story of my name, in terms of, because my first name Jamil, which I was birthed with or given upon birth, is the male version of the female version, which is Jamila, meaning beautiful in Arabic. So Jamil is the masculine version of that. But because my sister was Jamila, and to call me Jamil would just get confusing, because we both, so Shaka, my middle name, was what was my spoken name, or like how you call given name, or the name people would call me. And after some time, it must have been around like when I was about 20, maybe, so about 11 years ago, or 12 years ago. And I never even thought about the fact that somebody gave me a name. My mother somebody gave me a name, and I was like, hey, I'll just choose my own name. Zulu. From young, Shaka Zulu was something that, I knew I was named after Shaka Zulu, he was a warrior. He was a king of the Zulu tribe in South Africa. And that name really resonated with me. I read his books. I read lots of books on Shaka, and also the miniseries. If you haven't seen the Shaka Zulu miniseries, get on that. It's amazing. I think I broke my arm or broke my leg one time, and I couldn't leave the house, so I had to watch the whole. I got to watch the whole series. I watched it when I was really little, but I didn't retain much of it. But then when I sat down, with incapacitated, could not move, I watched that, and that just inspired me again. Like really knowing the roots of that name, I was like, wow, this is on a deeper level than reading about the history books, and it really resonates with me. And again, I like the Zion came out of nowhere. I was just like sort of dropped in one day. And I'm definitely not like a Zionist or anything like this. It's just, and it's just a name that I like. I kind of like lion. Like I resonate with the lion a lot. So, but L is not Z. So
went for the alliteration. Sounds like lion, Zion. Yeah, let's go.
Not too much.
I thought it was lion for ages.
Yeah. Well, I changed it to Zulu Flow Lion on the Facebook for a little while in homage to Snoop Lion when he changed his name. So from Snoop Dogg to Snoop Lion.
That would explain why.
But no, it's I'd love to know how did you get into neuroscience, and what led you down that path, and what have you give us like a whirlwind tour into your delving into the mind and the brain and the hardware and the software that you're talking about earlier on.
Yeah, look, I'll start with saying I was a weird kid. I was a weird kid.
In what way? What kind of weird? Like tin hats on your head and foil on the head, or
yeah, actually, not the kind of weird that on the outside was visible, but the kind of weird that I never really felt like I fit in. So the kind of weird that
like
was on the inside.
like you'd have an imaginary friends, or the kind of
Like,
weird where you'd play chess by yourself, or like what kind of weird are we talking?
well, so when let's fast forward way back when to primary school, and you know, like year 5, year 6, when the other girls in my class, in my school, they are interested in, at that time it was NSYNC and Backstreet Boys and pop culture and what's, you know, that, like, who are the cute boys, and here I am thinking, why are we here? What's the purpose of existence? What's and I grew up quick, and I when I was 12, I had my first full-blown existential crisis that resulted in my I'm very honest in public in sharing, my first suicide attempt was when I was 12, and I was someone that was full of questions, seeking answers, and didn't really have useful frames or ways of understanding. I was always fascinated by psychology and the mind, and well, I love anything to do with the nature of existence and how we create consciousness. So when I graduated, or when I finished high school, I knew what I was going to study at uni. It was going to be neuroscience and psychology. I was very, very...
You were very, very gone?
I was very blessed to go to a super awesome liberal arts university that really emphasized learning how to learn.
Mm.
It wasn't so much about we give you answers and content, but really taught me how to ask useful questions and dig deeper. And I'm so very grateful. When I talk often about how unique my university is and was, where you might appreciate that it's Oberlin's the name of it. It's really well known in the US, not so much here in Australia.
Whereabouts is it?
Ohio.
Cool.
Ohio. It's known.
A lot of is Ohio? Is that like where Salt Lake City is? No, that's Utah, isn't it?
Utah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Oberlin in particular is known for its activism. It's social justice activism. It was the first school in the US to admit people regardless of race or gender. No other school had done that, so Oberlin was pioneering in that way. Oberlin was a stop on the Underground Railroad, which was part of the anti-slavery movement, if those of you that don't know what the Underground Railroad is here. Yeah, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. spoke there. It's a school that's got a lot of tradition. That's very very linked with like future makers, world changers, critical thinkers. When Michelle Obama spoke there for commencement, she was like, oh, I'm so in awe of you. I'm so grateful to be here. I'm here at Oberlin with you. And I feel really blessed to have gone to that school. I really do.
And did that come from the fascination? Was like, what were your parents doing? Are they philosophers? Are they religious? Are they kind of into their spirituality? Like, was there an influence parentally or familially, or just like with the circles that you grew up around?
Oh, look, there's always an influence parentally. Always. Just not always on the surface. So both my parents are insurance agents, so you can't find it in their occupation. And I am recognizing more and more and more all the layers of how much what I learned from my parents led me down this path. You know, I often say in the talks and trainings that I give that what's modeled matters most. And
there's that alliteration again.
My parents modeled yeah. My parents modeled some things for me that created some powerful contrast. So I would not be as what's the right word? Adamant is close, but as unwavering in my conviction about the way that we make up stories in our minds that create experiences for ourselves, if I hadn't had such powerful contrast growing up with the parents that I had. So
what do you mean by that? What do you mean by powerful contrast? Is in that they're totally contrasting to each other, or?
Yeah, there's that, and there's the like, you know, some people their parents, like I had friends, their parents they like are really loving and considerate to each other, and you can tell like years later they're still cute to each other, and they're
that's a thing.
They call each other sweetheart.
That's really a thing.
It's a thing. I had friends' parents that were like that. It's totally a thing. They're like adorable,
I'm just joking.
a cute
I know
little.
It's a thing.
But I didn't have that. I didn't have that growing up. But I had friends' parents that had it, so I knew it was possible. But I didn't have it at home. It was like my parents. It's like they tolerated each other, and it was more like, you know, this is our death sentence that we've got to live out because we're married. And that decisions can never be changed. Once you make them, you're stuck with them for life.
We've signed the dotted line.
Exactly.
We're in it for eternity. Death do us part.
Yeah.
Hurry up and die.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, I'm on the so in contrasting to one another, but also in what other way did you were you using the term the contrast in what you shared?
So my mom, I love that line in My Big Fat Greek Wedding. Have you seen that movie? It's one of my favorites.
I've seen a lot of movies. I think I have seen that one, but I've rarely watched the movie. I'm end up doing something else.
So that movie, there's a line in it where she says, "If nagging was an Olympic sport, my mom would be a gold medalist."
Okay.
And I love that line. And
I can relate to that.
If suffering was an Olympic sport, my mom would be a gold medalist.
Okay.
If struggling was an Olympic sport, my mom would be a gold medalist. She, bless her, worked. She worked very hard and modeled for me how to sacrifice and how to struggle. And I learned that intimately, and I learned that well. Mm-hmm. And it's those learnings that fundamentally make it so that I appreciate what it feels like to have ease, to have flow, to have joy, to have the things that other people seem to have that I didn't have. And I didn't understand what was wrong with them, that they had those things, or what was wrong with me that I didn't. So it's the contrast that I really feel truly grateful for.
Gratitude is a powerful thing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So they weren't religious, or they were spiritual, or they were scientific, or. So
both my parents are very religious, but different religions, and so it was a little bit of a bit of almost a competition between the two of them, who was going to convert us to their religion. And so obviously
us meaning your siblings?
Yeah, myself and my brother at the time. So I took the scientific route. I was like, my mom's very Christian.
You're like, neither nor.
Oh, neither nor. And they're both people of great faith. You know, mom, her hero is Jesus. And you know, growing up, I would say a woman uses the word Jesus more often than the word and. I was privileged enough to hear a sermon on the way to school every single morning in the car. But of course, the sermons were often like, you know, you need to hurry up and accept Jesus into your heart, because if you don't, then you'll go to hell.
Wow. And he was big on suffering and struggle.
Yeah. In not so much, actually. Not the actual Jesus. No, his followers, yes.
Yeah.
But not the actual Jesus. Which is funny, that, isn't it? He was big on love and kindness. The things that I too am big on: love and kindness, treating people, with compassion and appreciation for, regardless of who they are and how they are, and any situation or circumstance.
And the dad man, who was his hero?
He's Sikh, so I don't know if you know a lot about Sikhism, which I've learned. Both religions I really appreciate and respect in their like fundamental core tenets of course, all religions, right? When you boil them down, they all say the same thing. But I often say to people, like, the difference between religion and spirituality, which the Intrinsic Brilliance Institute, where we are a place where science and spirituality intersect for personal and professional development. So I think of religion as like the rule book, books and guidelines. So if you're thinking with the head brain and you're using logic to understand what should we do and what shouldn't we do, that's where you get religion. And if the faith is from the heart, then that's where spirituality comes from. And it's that connection, that sense of appreciation for not the strategic level or the tactics or what's the do's and don'ts, but rather what's the intention? What's the underlying intention? And actually recognizing that. So they're all the same. We're like Sikhism and Christianity. Like I think now, I'm certain now that both my parents are different people than they were when I grew up. They can see and appreciate that to a much greater degree than they did when I was growing up. So.
Well, it's a long journey, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that's what we're here for.
And were you always with the scientific? You said, I'm not going to go that way. I'm not going to go that way. I'm going to go my own way and go the science route. Was that, you've mentioned that the spirituality and the science, where it intersects, that's where you are now, working with this institute. Was it always like that? Or was it like, all right, science, and then there was a moment where that you married the two in yourself, or was it that was always there?
Yeah, I didn't actually understand the concept of spirituality. It was very, as they say, woo-woo to me. It was something that I was like, what do you mean by that?
Show me it.
How do you operationalize, like in scientific terms, how do you operationalize it?
Can I touch it? Put it in my hand so I can take it apart. What do we put in the science basket? And there was a moment, to answer your question, where it all kind of came together, where I recognized that
they're basically different languages. That's all it is. And it's whether someone says I love you in English, or if they say it in Russian, it can affect how the person, like what the person who's listening, what language they understand, whether they're skeptical of it, whether they're like, what did they say? Or whether they're like, oh, I love you too.
Yeah.
And so having had an experience of working with someone who basically fate in the form of burnout and overwhelm brought me to my knees, and I had someone enter my life who was basically the strangest example of a person I had ever encountered. She was, to me, she was like a unicorn. In that she was just so ridiculously effervescent and happy and like just cheery and smiley, and I hadn't ever met anyone like her, and I thought she was can I curse and say batshit crazy? I thought she was mad, but there was something about her madness that I found compelling. Like maybe it was just curiosity has always been a strong driver of mine, and I was like, how are you so crazy?
So explain that a little bit. What do you actually, what brought you to that understanding of perception? Like, tell us. So
here I am in my life where I am. So never mind the fact that I graduated with a degree from the second top neuroscience program in the US. I was recruited based on my experience, not my education, and I had a lot of experience in events because I used to be a big community activist and organizer. So
coming from Almaston, of course.
Well, from high school, having gone to the Leadership Training Institute, and I had been organizing large-scale community events for thousands of people since I was 14. And so when I graduated from uni, I had run my student union there, and so my job straight out of uni was running another student union. And so fast forward to this, like, I'm working at a corporate events management agency. That's been a prelude for why were you working at a corporate event management agency? But I had this decade-long career in events where I just kind of took the path of least resistance because I was so fixated on moving to Australia, expatriating to Australia, that it didn't actually matter to me where I was working, because in my mind it was like, oh, if I come here, then all my problems will magically disappear.
Right.
So here I am.
Work out.
I think you know how the story ends. Same shit, different toilet. So I'm here. The night that broke me, I'm at my desk at my office. The clock on my computer shows me that it's 10:14 p.m.
Mm-hmm. You've been there since when?
7 o'clock that morning.
Wow.
And those hours had been pretty standard, regular hours for about 3 weeks. And before that, I was leaving slightly earlier, around 8:30 or 9. And
grinding.
This had been going on for this, like the intensity of workload. It had had been going on for, I was there 2.5 years. And I just was so utterly, bone achingly exhausted. Like blurry-eyed, heavy-headed, beyond ability to focus. And I didn't know then what I know now, that the reason things took me so long is because I was so sleep deprived and fatigued that I didn't have focus or ability to attend to things. And if I did actually have if I took time to breathe or go for a walk instead of just thinking, oh, I got to get through all of this, I got to get through all of this, and kept spiraling down this slope of overwhelm, that I could actually be a lot more effective and high functioning. And so fortunately.
And this is where you met Homegirl?
Yeah, well, I didn't meet her there. It was like a month later, I met her at Pete's Ridge Festival, actually.
Hey, Pete's Ridge. Shout out Pete's Ridge. I met some amazing folk at Pete's Ridge also, I think 2009 maybe.
Yeah, was that the year? Was it 2009? Or it was 2010, I think. Maybe there, like, what year was it? No, it was 2012. It was shortly, I think it was 2011, 2012. But that's where I met her. She was running a workshop.
Do you want to give her a shout out, or you want to leave her unnamed?
Oh, I can. Gabrielle Semin
Cool.
is her name. Yeah. And she was running a workshop. Her title at the time, it's different now, I'm sure. Her title at the time was Writer and Space Holder for Radical Loving Change. And as I said, I just hadn't ever met anyone that was so, I suppose you can say, high on life.
Yeah.
I hadn't ever met anyone like that. And so I started speaking to her. She had a mentoring program. I started speaking to her weekly for, it was probably about a year before I had this profound aha moment where I realized that my default thought pathway, which at the time before was life is meaningless, just kill yourself. And what I know now that I didn't know then was that was my brain, my body's way of, the association was, I need a break, I need some rest. And because my mom had a saying, I'll rest when I'm dead, and she would just push through. She wouldn't listen to when her body was saying, I am exhausted, I'm tired. She'd just power on and push through and say, I'll rest when I'm dead. So here I've developed this association that's like, in order to have some, my body was crying out, screaming to me, saying, please take a break. You've just been pushing us so hard. And I was like, no, you must wait till you die. So of course, it's no wonder I was like lusting after death, right? Craving death.
Like, you get to have a rest, finally.
I know, right? Then I could maybe take a bit of a breather.
It's a long one, with no breath.
Yeah, exactly. But it's funny, the associations that we make.
It's incredible, right?
Realizing, and so I finally, like over time, working with her, rewired that default pathway to life is a game, play it and have fun. So
just that there, what you just said, seems like you've just, over some time, you retrain that. I'd like you said that in about 1 second. I'd just like to break that apart a little bit and find out what that entailed, exactly, that breaking that apart or breaking that down, I think you said.
Yeah, cool. So So I'll spare this the super technical bit, and I will. I often explain the way neuroplasticity works in terms of a metaphor of bush bashing. So if you've ever gone on a bushwalk where there's a super paved path, and compare that to when you're kind of creating and carving out a path when there's no, like, it's just wilderness there, right? So in the brain, every time we think a thought, we think it more easily and more quickly. And that thought, for me, I had been thinking so often that it had become the equivalent of a superhighway, like the M5 is here, where it's like I would hop on that thought and just be there, just before, I would end up. It's the
Autobahn.
Yeah. Yeah. And it didn't even matter what the prompt was. Someone might say, or my partner could say, "Oh, we've run out of toothpaste," and my mind would go there, life's meaningless, just kill yourself. Like, I would just end up there.
So is this the idea that the neurons that fire together wire together?
Same principle. Same principle. And it's basically just recognizing. So the brain recycles resources. So so similarly, the neurons that don't fire together unwire. And what happened in directing my attention on repeatedly thinking life is a game, play it and have fun, just trying to be as if adopt this reality, pretend like it's true for her. She has fun with life. How does she do that? How is she doing that? How can I do that? And play with this concept of life is a game, play it and have fun. In the beginning, I was super suspicious and skeptical, like, well, maybe it is for you. It's not like that for everyone. And
it's not what I'm experiencing. Life's shit. I just want to kill myself all the time.
Exactly. Yeah. Life's hard. Life is hard.
So how did you keep turning up and keep deciding to bring forth that curiosity and that curious mind of questioning? I wonder what it is like. Oh, I wonder what if I am wrong, and questioning yourself. And I want, that turning that skepticism into, or maintaining the curiosity despite the skepticism. How did you go about that?
Well, I think the largest reason is deep inside, I wanted to be wrong. I wanted to be wrong because if I wasn't wrong, it meant that I would have to endure the rest of however many, like, and look, it was, my options were pretty bleak. And so I was desperate, for lack of a better word. And so often when people say to me, "Oh, I feel like I've hit rock bottom," I'm like, "Excellent.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Now I can get to work done."
Yes. Yeah. Because that will be the foundation and the bedrock upon which you build. This is my partner, Michael, who's just walked in the door.
Howdy. I don't know if you can hear me while the headphones are on.
He can't hear you because I've got the headphones in. So.
I've got the end of it. How desperate you were.
Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome. And so that just kept the curiosity going, and then you kept questioning and kept turning up and kept engaging this kind of thinking, and re-engaging this person who you looked at and went, what this crazy person, this person who's just like such a unicorn, and that kept you coming back. I guess I'm thinking of like a well that you drink from, and it's delicious water, and it nourishes you. So I guess it was nourishing, and you kept coming back.
Well, actually, I was just writing a story about her earlier today when I was writing about we've got a new program launching on September 15th, the Excellence Program, and it's a a global launch of a reiteration of a program that we've had for a while. So I'm writing some blogs and articles on what are some of the things that it transforms and supports with. And one of the prompts was, do you feel time poor? And I remembered how often I would use that saying when I first started working with her, and how she'd laugh at me. And
there's 24 hours just like everyone else.
Yeah.
168 in a week.
And just she would marvel at my ability to create poverty where there was none. But it was true in my experience. I felt time poor. I felt really truly time poor. I was overwhelmed and inundated, and I felt like anytime anyone would ask me for any social engagement, that was the first thing out of my mouth was, I'm time poor. I had to, and I'd keep reinforcing it. And she'd be like, why do you keep telling that silly story? Chris was very blunt with being like, I'm not buying into your shitty stories.
Yeah.
It's just super blunt about it. Like,
and you could probably,
and anytime I would say something, she'd be like, that's an interesting story. She just wouldn't even engage. And so it was fascinating to witness. I'm like, isn't it like that for you? Isn't it like everybody else in my life had that experience?
So you had this different perspective, and it was, were you seeing, I guess, were you having wins like from this new perspective and trying on these new ideas? Or you mentioned that you kept coming back and it took a while, but those new neural pathways started, you started shifting that story. I'm imagining that you must have seen some benefit in order to come back. Otherwise you probably would have been like, you probably wouldn't have been there. You wouldn't have kept returning to that well if it wasn't nourishing.
So the unconscious wins were there first, meaning I noticed that I felt better whenever it was this, I couldn't quite pick, even though it felt like we just argued whenever we talked, but not really argued, but just,
didn't see eye to eye.
Yeah.
She's telling me exactly. I'm just making this all up.
Yeah, pretty much. And I didn't have any other experience with I'd never seen a space holder for radical loving change or any other version of that before. And but I just noticed that I felt better. I felt better. That was the first thing. And pretty soon after, I started sleeping through the night. I hadn't been doing that. I'd been waking up with panic attacks for yonks, like the better part of a year. Like I hadn't been able to sleep through the night. I'd wake up thinking, oh, what have I forgotten? And my mind, which had been constantly whirring and racing, started slowing down. I noticed that I was getting more done in less time at work. I was more focused, more productive, more effective. These are the things that I noticed. But the most profound thing for me was that it was like, oh, I don't actually want to kill myself anymore. And it sounds amazing. Funny when I say it, but I had never not had that feeling. I had, as far back as I could remember, there had always been this undercurrent of, it would go through different phases of how actively I wanted to kill myself, but there was never a day where I wouldn't be like, I'd be very okay if a bus hit me right now. That would be my preferable, outcome. To end this chore that I have to endure. That's called existence.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I was so looking for an out that didn't send me to hell, which suicide would have. And so, according to my mom's story.
To the stories.
So, according to my mom's story. And so just being able to see all the layers and layers and layers of stories that once upon a time I thought were reality. It was powerful.
And from what it sounds like, there was this, because it's something I often do as well. Like, and you probably notice it too, working with clients, that you hear all types of stories, and now you're probably doing the same thing where you're totally not engaged. That's an interesting story you're telling yourself there, and yeah. So it's, in terms of that, it's something that we deal with often, and now when you can see it, you're like, hey, by the way, did you know you can create any story? You got the pen and you can author it however, this can end however you want it to end. And that it seems like she was sprinkling that kind of idea to you in that time. And something that's been coming up the whole time you've been talking is the idea of story. We've been talking about story and the power of story and the power of the neural pathways that fire together. And this whole time, I'm about to in September, I think, go to the Tony Robbins event, and he mentions a lot about state and story. He talks about state or story. Yes. And so this is something I know I'm pretty sure you're familiar with the neuro-linguistic programming and doing the brain training. Where does state come into the story, for lack of a better word there? Yeah.
So in our framework, it's the situation plus the story that creates. So the state of, so we differentiate between, there's like a clean slate of, there's these core states of just presence and being present, centered. There's presence and centered. And anything other than that, grounded, centered, present, if there is any emotion, there's a story. There's some story on some level to create that fits like that physiological response to generate that. There's on some level, and whether the thing is, most of those take place beneath the level of awareness, right? So people aren't aware of the stories that they're telling themselves. That's why I love neuro-linguistic programming so much, is that we can more easily bypass the conscious stories, which often aren't actually the issue. It's what's underneath the level of consciousness.
I'm time poor. Really? Is that what's really going on?
Yeah, well, that's, the rational mind will make up a story, but to try to explain, well, what's the feeling that we have? So when I work with clients, we reverse engineer this one equation. I teach all of my clients this one equation: data plus meaning equals feeling. So if they're having a feeling, I'm feeling this. I'm like, okay, what's the meaning given it? What's the meaning you've given to create that feeling? Because it's not the data. The data is just, it is. It is. The experience is the experience.
So give us an example of that. So plug in some actual figures that would illustrate what that equation in action.
So a perfect example is my partner. When I moved in with him, he had a cowskin mat. And whenever I would see it, I would feel sad, hurt, angry. It was a triggering object for me.
Is this a lifestyle thing? Like you practicing veganism or something like this, or?
Yeah, I was adamant about extending compassion to all beings everywhere. I say I was, like I'm not still. Yes, I am adamant about extending compassion and love to all beings everywhere. And so I saw this cowskin mat, and the meaning that I had made of it was, he's unkind. He's being unkind in this experience. There's cruelty in my home, and I couldn't handle it. So I told him, you've got to put that away. I can't have it. You have to, I can't see it. It's too much for me. So rather than address the issue, the trigger, and transform the story, I was like, no, just put it away. Put it away. Can't handle it. Put it away. So fast forward to a year later, and we're in a couples counseling session. And
I was right, by the way. She was wrong.
And the counselor, so he's talking about, I've made all these changes, and mind you, he had changed quite significantly since we had gotten together. He had gone from he lost something like 25 kilos, it switched from a predominantly like Macca's and KFC type of diet to whole foods, plant-based. He had it's stopped binge drinking, about 80 bourbons a week, and had been sober for well over a year. He had
just like change. Just like, yeah. And you're like, and you're like, can you just throw the mat out? Come on, give me something. There's not enough here. Just give me something, a little bit.
So that's what he's saying. He's like, I've made all these changes, and she hasn't changed anything. She hasn't changed anything.
She's still upset about the bloody mat.
So I'm like, okay, sweetheart, I understand. What is it that you would like me to change? And I shit you not, he said, I want my cowskin mat back. I want my cowskin mat back. So here I am.
Of course.
Faced with this opportunity that's like, okay, cool. All right. Vegan's going to have a cowskin mat on her floor under her dining table. Okay, cool. What stories do you need to reframe to be okay with this? How can you be okay with this?
So you had to apply the equation.
Yeah, and I had to do some transforming of meanings.
Do some arithmetic.
Yeah, and actually, and recognize. So right now, the cowskin mat that's under my feet, the representation that it has for me is that we have an opportunity to give a voice to the things that we care about. We have an opportunity, all of us. And if I speak for myself, if I don't take that opportunity, then it doesn't feel right and aligned for me. So now I'm quite grateful to have that visual cue, that reminder of speak up about the things that matter to you. Speak up.
Amazing. And going into the idea of, being a brain trainer and what it is you do and what you love to do and working with people and organizations, and what would you say is, I guess, the top most beneficial ideas that you present? I know you mentioned this equation is one of them. This is one equation that you mentioned to everybody. Is there another X amount of tools that you these are the ones? If you were to have a toolkit and you could only give someone, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 tools to take with them, and that's out of your whole bag. I know your bag probably contains countless amount of tools in it. What would be the topmost tools that you would put in that kit to give to everyone, if you literally only could have fit maximum 5 in there?
Wow, what a powerful question. 5.
It might be 2 or 3. It might be 1. Maximum 5 though.
Yeah. Well, first thing would be, breathe. Be aware of your breathing.
Mm.
And recognize the value of breathing evenly. So what most people don't know is that to be inspired, the word inspired, I feel inspired, inspire literally to breathe in. Inspiring, isn't it? Yes, I'm breathing. It is very inspiring. And to balance the inhale breath with the exhale breath, to breathe evenly, to inspire and expire evenly, is when the system is in balance.
And yeah, go on. I was just about to ask why. Like, why is that the number one thing that you mentioned?
Why would the nervous system being in balance would be the number one thing that I mentioned? Well, because it's for the nervous system to be in balance. So if we simplify, we've got our fight or flight system, which is when we're stressed, and when we're breathing in more than we're exhaling, we're essentially manic. We can create mania for ourselves through our breathing, the same way we can create depression for ourselves through our breathing. When our exhales are longer than our inhales, and life is hard, and we unconsciously, anytime we're feeling emotion, we can adjust that emotion through the breathing, because we can't actually be feeling emotion when we've got even breathing and our attention's on our breathing. So it's a really quick, easy, effective way to tap into a centered state.
Mm-hmm. Makes a lot of sense too.
And yeah, and from a centered state, from a grounded, centered, steady state, is when we can actually see the stories, being out of the stories, and give ourselves space to transform, because we can't actually transform a story when we're in the story.
Mm. Well, I work with Beth every day. It's something
so deeply in it.
It's something that I encourage a lot too. But just being there, I just trying to pry into the depths of why and how the thinking is around that. So I'll definitely be questioning to deepen the understanding of it.
Well, even breathing is the first step of the multi-braining process, because the quality of the information that will arise comes from the quality of the state that the person is in at the time. So I work predominantly with visionary entrepreneurs, and the process that I do with them, one of the tools, one of the strategies that I use, is to help them tap into aligned action, like to understand what is their most highly effective, wise decisions. How do they make wise decisions for themselves through finding alignment with their head, the heart, and the gut, the three brains that we have. And I'm sure you've heard the saying before, we can't solve a problem from the same level of thinking that created it, the same mind, the same consciousness that created it. And so I see my job as a brain trainer. Yeah. Yeah. I see my job as a brain trainer. I have one key goal, and that's to elevate someone's consciousness, elevate their state of mind, their thinking, so that they can then solve their problems. They can find a different solution. So it starts with that quality of being in a centered state, and the breath is a fundamental part of that. If someone's not breathing evenly when they come to see me, that's, well, are you aware your breathing's not even? Let's take a moment and just breathe. Let's just breathe. And then we can begin the process of checking in with all of our brains and accessing the wisdom that they each have, tapping into the compassion, the creativity, the courage, the vast well of wisdom within.
Beautiful.
So
I'd probably say
the second, breath is number one. The second thing I would say is recognize that your unconscious, your wiser self as I often call it, your higher self, deeper self, your wiser self is constantly giving feedback and sending messages. And emotions are one of the ways in which it's communicating with you. So learn the language of the unconscious. Learn the language of the unconscious so that you can understand what it's saying.
So just give us an example of a good example of that, or a poor example of that, of, you know, the unconscious sending messages. And I guess one of the examples was you not listening, getting the panic attacks, you know, that sort of stuff. But then maybe a different example, and then also a switch that would make that into a good example of understanding the language of the unconscious.
So meaning everything's there to communicate for a reason. Absolutely everything that's there is there for a reason. There's an intention behind it. There's so rather than being like, oh, I'm frustrated that I have, you know, I've got this going on. Oh, what's that there for? What's that there to communicate? It's getting really curious about that. So an experience, a story that I can share with you about my experience. So many different times. I'll share with you the story from earlier today. I was exploring when my partner, when his son is in town for school holidays, I noticed that I can start to feel quite restricted. And since freedom's a really high value of mine, there were some stories around parenting and around feeling like the words that had come out was like, I feel like a slave, you know. So being able to recognize, okay, there's something that's being communicated in this feeling. If I had dismissed it and just been like, oh, that's just silly, that I wouldn't have actually been able to understand what my unconscious is calling me to. You know, that even though there was a story there that helped create it, there's an underlying intention behind the story, and the story will find another way, will persist in another way until we get to what's the underlying intention? What is the underlying intention?
In that case, it was...
So in that case, it was there was a feeling of resentment towards him for being a kid because he was dependent. Because as a kid, I was fiercely independent because that's what was valued and loved more. That's what was more highly appreciated, is being self-sufficient and independent. And so that's what I learned. And so he would be in town, here's this 10-year-old that is just a kid, and I'm like, why can't you do your own laundry? Why can't you
all right.
I don't know.
So what's wrong with this person? It's not working.
Yeah. So,
and that is learn the language of the unconscious, which is emotions. It's other things also, not just emotions, or
other things as well, but the doorway is emotions.
Okay.
So before you can get to the other things, you got to go through the doorway.
We've got our bag, we've got the breath, we've got learn the language of the unconscious. Anything else in that bag?
What else is in that bag? I would say you have someone on your team, in your space, someone that holds, like someone that you have a space to explore your inner world. Because we know by now that life, our experience of life is the reality that we create, the stories that we tell. So if at any point we're experiencing something that we don't want to be experiencing, something that's less than ideal, to have some space like that we can explore how are we creating that. And I am, as much as I'm an advocate of meditation and journaling and personal contemplative practices, I really do believe in the value of having an outside perspective, because we cannot see our own blind spots. We cannot see our own blind spots. We miss things when that
they can be so close to us that we can't see them.
Yeah. Plain as day to someone else. So I know from the people that I've coached over the years, the thousands of coaching sessions, it's been something like in 4,500 now, that the things that, like, if we're to really create epic momentum and traction in pursuit of the experiences that we want to have and the stories that matter to us, that we would like to live and create, then there can be no greater investment than investing in having a space that we commit to weekly evaluing our stories and yeah, what's underneath them, what's like the foundation of them.
So this is like an external sounding board, an external auditing process where we look and go, hey,
we audit, and
where am I really at?
Yep. And whether that's a coach or a body talk practitioner or whatever, whatever way we choose to do that work, but to have an external sort of space that we can explore
the inner world, or the inner workings. Cool.
Our inner reality. Yeah.
Is there anything else in there? You've only got two more spaces left in this bag.
Oh, look, I think I might leave it at 3, only because my beautiful partner has been patiently waiting for me, and I did tell him I would be available.
Yeah, that's okay. That's absolutely fine.
I do have heaps more that I could share. The Excellence Program has the Excellence Program has 48 weeks in it. So every week, 48 weeks, we have a different offering.
Yeah.
See through this perspective. And it's not necessarily a tool so much as an invitation. Try this on, be in this way. So that's, and see what kind of outcomes you get. So like I'm a huge advocate of constantly be experimenting and tweaking and recognizing that everything's feedback and be aware of that. So
amazing. So where can people find the Excellence Program? How can people find you? Can get in touch with you if they want to continue this conversation with you? Yeah,
intrinsicbrilliance.com.au, and pretty soon there'll be the Divya Darling. I'll have my own website for Divya Darling as well. That's more focused on keynote speaking and the Enlighten Up message. But in terms of coaching and the Excellence Program and the practitioners there, Intrinsic Brilliance.
Beautiful. And you're based in where?
We're based in Sydney, but we work with people all over the world.
Beautiful. So they can connect with you wherever they are.
And they can flick an email to smile@intrinsicbrilliance.com.au.
Excellent. And just finally, thank you so much for spending your time and spending the extra time with us. I thoroughly appreciate that. So send my appreciation to the partner for allowing you to be with us for so long. And
he'll say thank you.
And also just a last little note. In terms of each of these episodes, I love to get sort of just one final thought, whether it's a question you want to ask the tribe, whether it's an idea, a thought, something that's something that's coming through right now, just to leave as a little bit of a final thought for this episode. I'll just leave the ball in your court and allow you to finish it off for us.
The question that I most often ask, if you've ever had a coaching session with me, is what's presupposed in that? what is the unconscious, the presupposition? What's the assumption that's underpinning that? So whatever that is, what's presupposed in that, there's so much value in questioning the assumptions that we didn't even know that we had. And so to me, that's one of the most powerful questions that we could ever ask ourselves, no matter what we're creating, whatever result it is. Or, you know, if we're having if we have an intention and a desire for something, what's presupposed in that is
amazing.
Yeah.
So what are you presupposing? What are you assuming about?
That there's my precept, like that there are, everything we do is colored by what we don't even know that we're assuming. And the closer that we can get to unpacking those assumptions and to get to that space of really true presence without any story attached to that, then that's where we touch another level of being, another way of being, you know.
I know exactly. That's where we start living life in the flow zone.
Yes, you would know.
Beautiful.
And that's what it's all about.
Right. Thank you so much for your time, and we will continue this conversation at another time. You know, my long-term plan with this show, so I'm sure there'll be ample opportunity to have you back on. I'd love to have you if you're up for that too. So
thank you so much for asking me.
It doesn't stop here.
No, well, thank you so much for having me on, asking me to be a guest on this show. I've really enjoyed chatting with you and sharing with you and your tribe.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And we'll see you again soon. And until then, rock on.